All right. We are live. Here we go. At night. Welcome, everybody. My name is Nike Olabisi-Green, and I am the creator and chief movement leader at NOLA Movement. At NOLA Movement, I believe that when women are well from the inside out, we can change the world. And I serve that big mission by creating and curating high energy events, coaching, group and one-on-one retreats, spaces for women to find wellness from the inside out. And so that's what we are doing here tonight. That's what we did this summer at the Ignite Ladies Book Club. And this is just really an opportunity over a glass of wine, over a cup of tea, before bed. Maybe you're already snuggled up in bed. Maybe you're watching or listening to the replay, but this is just an opportunity for us to revisit those powerful conversations from the summer and create meaningful, sustainable wellness in our lives. So I am thrilled because tonight I'm welcoming Dr. Jenny King. She is amazing and has created an amazing tool that I want to share with everybody because I've gotten the chance to see it and use it and whoosh. So that's how I roll. Like when I find and see and read books like the one we read over the book club that are powerful for me, all I want to do is share. So she is going to come on in a little bit and we're going to talk about setting boundaries and this amazing tool that she's created. So y'all know I am new to this world of YouTube and creating YouTube lives. If you are joining live, I can see your comments. So please, please, please let us know if you're live. Let us know where you're from, how you're feeling, what you're up to. If you have a glass of wine, if you have a cocktail, if you have some tea, make sure you let us know in the comments. So I'm going to get right in. So for our book club read, we did Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And of all the books that we did over the book club series, this was truly, and I said this at the live club, this is the one. If I had to encourage and invite you to choose one, this would be the one I would say grab it, because to me, it really felt like a Bible in the sense that I know it's one that I will return to in every season of my life. Even now, as I was preparing, I was like, oh yeah, it's time for me to return to this. And the reason why I love this book is because the author gives us scripts. She gives us scenarios. She gives us and lays out the places where we get to set boundaries, the relationships, family, friends. She lays it all out for us so beautifully. So, if you haven't read the book, it's all good. I'm going to give you just a few highlights, and I've got some notes here, a few highlights from the book, guys. So, like I said, every single woman grab this book, whether you're a mom, wife, sister, parent, co-parent. This is going to be a book that supports you. And the ways that it impacted me as I reflected on my own life, I really got to thinking about how I've shown up in my friendships, how I've shown up in business partnerships, how I show up as a sister, as a wife, as a daughter, and in the ways that I get to set boundaries to really protect my peace, to protect my energy, and to prioritize the ones that I love and to prioritize my energy as well, right? So from reading this book, I've already implemented so much of what the author Nedra shares and have started to have really powerful conversations with the folks that are closest to me. She defines boundaries as expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. Expectations in relationships help you stay mentally and emotionally well, learning to say no and learning to say yes when it's time. And this is an essential part of feeling comfortable when you're interacting with others. Again, I love this book because she provides scripts for us. So if you are like scared out of your mind and you know you need to have a conversation around setting a boundary, she literally gives you scripts that you can refer to. And she highlights some of the most difficult spaces that we set boundaries in, which I said already, oftentimes it's friends and with family, sometimes even with coworkers. So I discovered from reading this book that I'm a people pleaser. So raise your hand if you are listening or watching and you're a people pleaser. It's okay. It's okay. You're not alone. But this book really brought that to light to me. And so some of the thought patterns that Nidra highlights that she says that we have that prevent us from setting boundaries is just that, right? Sometimes we are people pleasers. We're afraid of being mean or sounding mean. We don't want to be mean, right? How many times have you said that? We don't want to be rude. How many times have you said that? Or you just feel powerless. You feel like you're going to have this conversation with someone and they're not going to do anything. Nothing is going to change. So you feel powerless and it's not worth it. You just believe that setting boundaries won't change anything. Ultimately, the author tells us that we get to be assertive, we get to take control, because boundaries will really set us free. So, hence the name of the book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. If you haven't read it, y'all, that's just a quick recap of the book. And now I want to bring up Dr. Jenny King to really chat about it. She joined me in Cleveland for this in person conversation. And so I'm thrilled to have her here with me live. Let's get her on here. Dr. King. All right, y'all. Do, do, do. Here she comes. Look at her beautiful face.
Hello. I'm so
Hello.
happy to be with you
Oh my
again.
God. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
We are like right on time to talk about boundaries as we head into holiday
Aren't we?
season, right?
Aren't we? Right? I couldn't have planned it better myself. Look at your fabulous earrings. Okay. And we're matching, which we didn't even plan, which I love.
Right? And I do have like a little something I could put over top, but that feels like a little much. So
Is it near? Because now that you said it's a little much, I feel like I want to see it. It's fine. It's fine. We'll keep going. We'll keep going. I love a little much. This is like, since we're here, like it can be dramatic. Like I can do like a one of these.
Yes.
Maybe I'll keep it like that because it feels like,
Well, it also looks so cozy.
yes, cozy, right? That's the theme. So, all right, ma'am, let's get into this. Please tell the people who you are, and why did this book resonate with you? Like how, where, why did it resonate with you?
Yes. Okay, so I am a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Work wise, I would say, so I'm now like an academic, whatever that means to you. I work in the social work school at Case Western, but prior to being kind of in higher education, I was a therapist for a really long time. And I
Mhm.
worked with generally like kids and families who had been in the midst of traumatic experiences. And that work, as you can probably imagine, it takes a toll
Yeah.
on,
Yep.
your mental health, your spiritual health, like your relationships, all of those things. And while I felt like I was pretty well prepared for sort of like the logistical side of doing that type of work, I was not really prepared for that toll. And
Mhm.
so it became very clear very early on that boundaries were tricky
Yep.
because it's so easy. These relationships are intimate. You become really close with folks and they become really close with you. And we're taught all these very, very clear kind of ethics and boundaries that when you're in practice look and feel very different.
Yeah.
A kind of in the background of that is, my own upbringing, my own socialization as a people pleasing woman too, which also was true for so many of the teens and the adult women that I worked with. It's,
Yeah.
we are socialized, I think, to avoid conflict. We're socialized to kind of keep the peace. We're socialized to think that our worth lies in our ability to take care of other people.
Push.
Um, right? And
Come
in
on.
prioritizing all of that,
Yep.
we don't ever really learn or really have a lot of places and spaces to get practice in, setting our own expectations and boundaries and all those sorts of things. So there were so kind of like so many intersections of me and my different identities that this book was like, okay,
Like in
this is
your
the one.
yes. Like she was all in the business, like, excuse me, ma'am.
And there are certain chapters that, like, as a therapist, I'm reading, like, okay, yeah, this is a piece I've got, right? And then you get
Yep,
to the next
yep.
chapter, like, okay, I'm gonna need a minute. I'm gonna walk away and come back to this one. But and that's so true too, that like there are certain parts of life where it does become easier, and then there are other parts
Yes.
where it stays really hard. And
Yeah.
so I think there was just there's so much there. The scripts are
Yeah.
so helpful.
Yeah.
There's just so much there.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you said that because that's something that I work to remind the women that I work with is that sometimes like you're going to go through a season of life and it's going to feel like you're knocking it out the park, right? Like boom, set boundaries,
Exactly.
drinking my water, moving my body, like hanging out with my friend, like all that like you're like I'm killing it right now. And then there's other seasons and or certain spaces that don't have that same ease, and it's like we find ourselves getting down on ourselves or being like really harsh with ourselves when it's like no, it's just a season or it's just this space that is going to take you approaching it differently. It's going to take you, I think, being like kind and easy with yourself to really like get clarity on like, okay, how do I want to move through this? This is hard, right? This is
Right.
hard. How do I, like, what boundary do I get to set for myself, right? Maybe even in
Right.
that, like that self-talk or, having to set boundaries with others. And it's funny because as we are talking, I know, and I'm so grateful because I have amazing in-laws, but I know like that is a space for so many folks where it's like, ah. And this time of
Oh, yes.
year, right, is the time of year where we see so much of the family that we don't see consistently, and so much of the family that might not share the same values that we share, or political beliefs, or all the things, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
going into those
Yes.
spaces with some boundaries because it's hard.
It's so hard. And two, I think like maybe this isn't true for everyone, but I think there was a time for me where it felt like if I would set this boundary one time, and then I would never have to do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would set it, people would accept it, it would be
Yep.
this, lovely thing. And it's just not like that. Like in thinking
Right.
about family, I feel like you have to revisit some of this stuff over and over and over again
Yep.
because we're always changing and they're always changing. And like again, what worked in one season is not necessarily what's going to work in the next. And so
Yep.
it takes up the nerve to do it once, but the reality is like it's not the end of the
Yep.
conversation. You kind of have to always go back to it.
It's so, oh my gosh, it's so funny that you're, yes, absolutely. I've had two recent reminders, conversations around this. One was in a podcast that I've started listening to called Vibe Check. It's so good. It's hosted by Sam Sanders, two other gay black men or queer black men. I can't actually remember, Sam Syed, or I don't want to get their names wrong, but it's called Vibe Check. It's excellent, and they were talking about that today in their most recent episode, as it relates to marriage, right? Because it's
Yes.
like you have to like we have this expectation in society, like oh, and they were specifically talking about the GMA, TJ Holmes, and that
Oh,
whole
yes, yes,
situation,
yes.
right? And they were just talking about how we are like, especially as folks that are cis or heterosexual, have this like idea of marriage and that it's like this like fairy wonderland, but like the reality is it actually takes work. And this idea that you can communicate something with your partner, and this is what I wanted to speak into that you were saying, you can communicate and be like, all right, I told you that. But the reality is to have like a sustainable marriage, and this is true in any relationship, like you're probably gonna have to revisit the thing and say it again or say it
Yes.
another way, right? Say it in a way that the person understands. And hopefully, like, there's some things that that's not the case. But there's absolutely some things where, like, it's gonna take some repetition, right, before it gets in. And then the other space that
Yeah.
I was having this conversation was around being a business owner and really like having to tell yourself, and I was speaking about myself, so I'll just speak about myself, reminding myself over and over and over again, that, yeah, like, this is the life that you created. So set the boundaries that you need to like stay in it,
Right,
right? Don't let your
right.
boundaries be sloppy, and revisiting those with myself. So I love
Yes.
that
And
you're,
I what you were saying about it being like this is temporary,
yeah,
right? So like this that it's not all or nothing. It's not like
yeah,
this piece of my life is now painting everything impossible. It's like this is just the thing that's going to take a little extra kindness, a little extra, me being gentle with myself
yes,
in order to kind of, hold myself the way that I want to through it. It's not like the be all end all of everything. And I think that too, like with people pleasers, as we are both openly identifying, that's super hard to do. It's like, what, somebody's mad at me? The
yeah,
world's gonna end. When
yeah,
in reality, it's like that's what's going to happen here as you are kind of creating. I think about it as like creating the container that you want
yeah,
for whatever the thing might be, and the boundaries of that container are gonna look different, and that's fine. And
yeah.
people can be mad at you. Like the world
Uh,
goes on.
yes, that part. The world goes on. The world goes on. Oh my gosh. We're already getting into really all the things. I don't think I have any questions for you. Let me look at my questions, because we're really getting into it. This is the thing. And I think I would offer, especially, or ask, especially as we're in the holidays, right? What would you offer to folks when they recognize, or maybe they're listening right now and they're like, oh yeah, we mentioned in-laws, we mentioned marriage, work,
Mhm.
maybe what are some spaces and or ways they can begin to think about setting boundaries as it relates to this holiday season, because it's like this 3 week kind of sprint that we're in right now. It's like the end of the year, it's Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all the things that folks celebrate. It's New Year's.
Mhm.
If you're like me and you're celebrating a birthday, it's all the birthdays.
Oh
Because us
gosh.
December birthday people are dramatic.
I
Like,
just,
I
yeah, I
need,
can't. No, I would be so dramatic. I get it.
right? I need you to celebrate me. Stop. I don't know about
Yes.
whatever holidays you do, but it's about me. So what would you offer to folks as they're navigating through this holiday season, and they recognize like, oh, maybe it will support me to set a boundary right now?
For sure. So I think that that last piece is super important. So give some thought to what are the spaces, what are the relationships where you can maybe free up a little bit of energy in order to make sure that you are getting what you need in order to make it through these 3 weeks or whatever. And like we've said, I mean, those those relationships and those spaces might be ones that are really tricky to set kind of firm expectations and boundaries in. I think that what we don't talk about enough is, and she does a great job in the book, but we talk about boundaries a lot, and it's like, here's what you say, right? Like, here's the way to phrase the sentence.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
Definitely use those scripts and know that what might be harder than saying those words out loud is the way it's going to land for the other person,
yeah, yep,
right? We
absolutely.
love homeostasis. We love for things to stay the same.
Yeah,
And in these relationships, when somebody kind of changes the rules, often like the recipient of that might sort of like ratchet up the stuff that you're trying to set a boundary around, right?
yep,
Knowing that ahead of time,
yeah,
that like it might get harder before it gets easier, I think is really important because it's
mhm,
very easy to say the thing,
yep,
have the other person react in a way that's uncomfortable or harmful, and then kind of abandon ship.
yeah,
But if you're able to frame it as like, this is a piece of kind of our growth together or our movement
yes,
together in this relationship, that I'm changing what's happening here,
yeah,
that's going to be hard for them. And they, may or may not behave in ways that make it harder for me. So don't abandon ship if that happens. Just know like we cling to what we're familiar with. And so, congratulations for kind of trying to move things in a different direction. And just know people won't necessarily get there as quickly as you are, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, I love that so much because I think you're right. Like it's easy, quite frankly, it's easy for us to sit here and talk about it, right? To talk
Right,
about setting
totally.
boundaries. Um, and when you're in the moment and your heart's beating and your palms are a little sweaty and you're in front of someone who you either love or respect or care enough about or in relationship with enough that you need to have this conversation, the feeling of it in your body and then preparing yourself for their response. Like that shit, that's the part where it's like, because once you're in it, like once you go in it, like you can't go out of
No, you can't. And people aren't going to be like, yes,
it. No, no.
congratulations. It's not
I'm
like
so
that.
listen, if you want somebody to do that, get in our IG DMs and we will clap for you, but like the
We will
person
clap for you.
I'll sing you a song, I'll give a virtual hug, but the person on the other side of that,
No.
they're not going to be feeling the warm and fuzzies.
Mm-mm.
And I will offer this because when I've had to set boundaries and have what feel like difficult conversations with folks, it also offers a chance for you to check in on their emotional maturity because I have had conversations where it was actually received well. They thanked me. They recognized that I was like creating some space that I needed. And
Yeah,
it like very quickly took our relationship, friendship to that next level of safety and
totally.
vulnerability because they were able to receive it. And so the other thing I'll offer as we're talking about it is sometimes it will really show you, especially if it's like a friend or maybe a romantic relationship, it will show you kind of where that person's at in their
Yeah.
emotional maturity. And that is not for you to call it out to like let them
No.
know, but just for you to like internally take note. Right. We don't want to add injury to insult, but
Right.
it is an opportunity, I think, for you to kind of like measure that. And that's not really maybe the intention of setting the boundary, but it is, an opportunity to see like, okay, how do folks respond when I show up for myself? Right? How?
Right. That's super important information, right? Whether they handle it well or whether they don't. And that's totally
Yeah.
true that there are people who, are grateful to receive that type of honesty.
Yeah.
And there are other people where it's like, okay, now I know kind of,
Yes. Yeah.
where things stand when
Yeah.
things get spiky or tricky. And
Yeah.
now I, can make decisions around what that's going to look like for us going forward. Yeah, it's not always bad, but regardless, I think you're right that it ends up with you having like just a little bit of a different perspective on
Yeah.
the relationship and how you all handle conflict together.
Yep. Absolutely. Big feelings. Big feelings.
Big feeling season. Oh my goodness, big feeling season. And like often, so it's going to get worse before it gets better, but
Yep.
often once it gets better, like
Yep.
once we're all tolerating that things are going to be different, it does feel really good. And
Yes.
that might be
Yes.
when the other person feels settled and
Yes.
kind of can sense into like, oh, actually this, this is right.
Yeah.
This is right. And I can appreciate, them showing up in this way for themselves. But
Yeah.
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Welcome to everyone that is joining us live. Thank you so much. I'm with Dr. Jenny King. We're having a conversation about boundaries, setting boundaries, finding peace, especially during the holiday season. We're revisiting the book that we read this summer, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. If you haven't read it, grab a copy. It is so, so, so good. Welcome to everyone that's live. I can see you in the chat. Let us know where you're from, what's resonating with you. If you know this holiday season, you're needing to set boundaries, let us know in the chat. Let us know in the chat. So I would love to move next into this amazing tool that you have created. You were in my DMs. I was like, ma'am, Like, excuse me? You did what? Like, my friends and my community and my network, like, y'all are out here writing books and workbooks. And, like, I'm like, okay. So, can you share with us what you have created? A couple of the things, because there's like two, I think, big pieces. But can you
Yeah.
share with us the tools that you've created to really support people in what I would call really just exhaling, like taking a break and
Yes.
getting back into your body? That's really what it did for me.
Yes.
So can you talk
Oh,
to
good.
that?
That's what I was hoping it would do for you.
Yeah, listen, I'm a real fan.
So honestly, like this all started for me at the very beginning of COVID. I was actually like 8 months pregnant when lockdown started.
Oh,
And, the stress was real and the challenges were super different. And it just felt like so much of kind of how I have been trained and have come to understand like the way that our minds and our bodies are impacted by stress that is unpredictable, that is like chronic, that there's like not an end in sight. Um, it became relevant to everybody. And so I started sort of just trying to put out information in ways that I thought could get to people because that especially I think like we're still there, but I think especially in the beginning that was a time that was like people were scrambling
oh
to
yes,
figure out
yeah,
how am I getting through the day, right?
yes,
What does work
yes,
look like? What does family look like? What does caring for kids look
yep,
like? What does caring for elders look like?
yes,
It was just there didn't seem like there was enough kind of out there to help folks
yeah,
understand that what that felt like and still feels like
yep,
where our brains are foggy and
yeah,
we're exhausted and maybe we're cranky, maybe whatever the case may be, a lot of that comes back to kind of the impact of that type of stress on the brain and the body.
mm,
And a big piece of that for me, so I know you in the book club covered What Happened to You, Dr. Perry and
yep,
Oprah, which his model, the neurosequential model of therapeutics, is one that I am trained in. And a lot of that kind of information is about how do we help folks manage that particular type of stress that's really tricky.
mm,
And a big piece of that is knowing that our kind of like at the biological sort of neuron level, our brains respond to little bits of activity and then rest,
mm,
right? Little bits and then rest, little bits and then rest. That's how we learn best. That's how we kind of come back into balance, come back into our bodies best.
yeah,
And the way that we frame like self care, those are some big air quotes, is not that, right? That's
yep,
it's very much about, of course, like so many things, a concept that is rooted in Black feminist thought that is meant to be sort of liberatory in its essence has become super materialistic and
yeah,
capitalist and all these things. Like you
yeah,
should spend all this money and all this time on
yeah,
getting back to yourself and back into your bodies. We didn't have access to any of that. Most of us didn't have access to it before, but we
right,
certainly didn't when we were on lockdown.
right,
And so many of the sort of like quick and easy practices that I have used for myself, that I taught as a therapist to my clients, that like I teach my children now, it
mm,
made sense to try to figure out a way to just help people have access to those.
yeah,
And so I call them micro practices because they're quick, they're super quick, like 3 minutes or less, almost always body based. You don't need anything.
yep,
Like you don't need stuff, you don't need anything around you in order to engage in them. And the first step in that was like, I don't want this to be something that exists only on a screen because, again, in
yes.
2020, we were living our lives on
This was it.
screens,
Yep. Yep.
right? So I ended up in the first place creating like a card deck. So, sort of like not really like a tarot card deck, but that sort of idea where it just describes, kind of gives you the directions on how to engage with this practice in a way that hopefully might bring you back into balance.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been really really cool to see the way that the card decks have been used. And I know folks that use them to start meetings at work, that use them in their
Mm,
classes at school, use them in group therapy that they facilitate, support groups at home with their kids. Like
yeah.
there are so many different ways that this stuff can be kind of built in
Yes.
order to create a different response to that pattern of stress, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was really so first of all, thank you. Thank you for recognizing so many things that you said, like in the midst of the pandemic, at the beginning, I don't even want to say the midst, but the beginning, it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I
Yes.
imagined when we were like at the beginning of it, I imagined like telling my kids and my grandkids about it because it was like so like you would get on the road because at the time you could, we would go get groceries like once every 2 weeks, which was
Right.
like not how we normally grocery shopped. And you would get on the road, the highways empty, no
Empty.
cars, like just some of the scenes from the pandemic like still like reverberate. And I think now that life is looking, it looks more normal, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
in big crowds again and spaces and concerts, and we're doing some of the things that we were doing in the ways that we were doing them before 2020. But I have these moments where I flash back to like, dang, remember when like you would go into spaces and like you had to stand 6 feet apart and they would have stickers on the ground, or you
Yes.
would go to the grocery store and have to wait outside in a line because they were only letting so
Yeah.
many people, or they had these seniors where seniors could only go, or they like recommended that seniors go in between these hours. So if you were someone like us, like you couldn't go grocery
Mm-hmm.
shopping during like just like whoosh. Like not to
Mm-hmm.
mention, I mean, I was leading fitness classes in person. So just the loss of that in person, but like
Yeah.
the tools, like there were like if you were not in a practice of getting quiet or movement or some of the things that you didn't need technology for, right? You just kind of like you just had to rely on your own practices to take care. Like if you weren't in that practice or didn't have those or have those
Right.
communities to be a part of, like like I just like how,
I
right?
know.
How
I
and
know.
and
And so many of the things that like would work before all of a sudden just didn't.
yep,
You know,
it
even if
didn't
you had some
feel
of those practices, it was just
yes.
things were too different. Like
Things,
it was just a different flavor of
yes.
discomfort and stress.
Yes.
I totally agree with you. I was talking to my husband the other day. Remember when they used to check your temperature before you could go into places?
Yep.
We were talking about that because a lot of kids and other folks are getting sick again. Like
Yep.
and you would be in a space and somebody would sneeze or cough and it was like
Oh,
remember that?
listen, I'm, first of all, let me, hold on, because I'm a germaphobe. Thanks, Mom. I was doing that before the pandemic. Like, I'm the
Oh
type that I would
no.
give side eyes, like, you sick, go home. Because and you spoke into this, like, our capitalistic culture. I always had an issue with folks who would show up to work. This is pre pandemic. I'm on a little rabbit hole with it right now.
Yes.
But this is pre-pandemic. I had an issue with folks who would come to work sick. I'm like, you are sick. You are now putting the rest of us at risk to getting sick because you feel like it's okay to come to work. But not that you feel like it's okay. You know that you're expected, and we're all part of this system,
Exactly.
capitalism, that requires you to show up even though you're not feeling well. I always
Yes.
like had such an issue with that. And so when the pandemic happened, my side eye turned into like a full body. Like I would,
Yes.
like, what are you doing, sir, ma'am?
I remember sneezing in an elevator, masked. A woman also masked who had a baby with her. And I was like, oh, oh my God,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm fine. I'm vaccinated.
Yep. Yep.
The
Yeah.
thing I think now is like the degree to which things feel normal, of course, is variable. But what hasn't happened is that we haven't metabolized any of that,
Yep.
right? Any
Yeah.
of what has shifted for us over the past couple of years, any of that added sort of anxiety or constriction, like there's not been a collective pause, there's not been a collective mourning, there's not been any opportunity to kind of like move through it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And that concerns me kind of
Yeah.
going forward. So
Agreed.
whatever tools we can be offering folks just to kind of
Agreed.
get some of that out, right? The
Agreed.
movement work that you do, that's exactly what that is,
Yeah.
right? You're kind of allowing some of that to kind of fizzle out, I guess.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think, and I'm a visual person in that I imagine folks like you and like me who are offering different tools to folks, different modalities that are really rooted in like practices that have existed for a long time. I imagine us as like almost like we're archaeologists and we're like taking the dirt off. Like we have these brushes and shovels and different things, and we're like actually just reminding folks like, hey, like this is like move your body. Like guess what?
Yes.
Like your ancestors like would do these things and your elders would do
Yes.
these things, right? And these are like, and this is what I love about your workbook and about the cards is that it like all you need is your body. All you need is
Yes.
your breath. All you need is to make the decision to take the time,
Yes.
right? And I feel like exactly what you said, the capitalism piece is like folks get lost in the other stuff, but like there's so many of us in the world right now that are like, no, come on, like you actually know what you need, and
Yes.
let me just help you remember. Let me
Yes.
remind you. Let me uncover some of that for you by offering these different tools and modalities that are easy and that like remind you like who you actually are.
Yes. I love that. I love that image of like, dusting the dirt off. You, we already have everything we need,
Yep.
right? In order to cope. And so much of that has been passed down to us
Yeah.
from elders,
Yep.
from ancestors. That's all there. And there are yes, so many layers of modern culture that make it so hard to kind
Yep.
of quickly and easily sense into. I think the piece with the body is especially tricky because there are so many kind of powerful forces at play to keep us
Yep.
disconnected,
That part.
right?
That part.
Stay in our heads, keep producing, keep consuming. Like, don't you
Yep.
dare
Yeah.
sense into your body and think about what
Yeah.
what's it's telling you what it needs. It's that, again, that comes back to the bottom line and what that means for sort of our culture of producing and consuming and, yeah, staying disconnected. It sounds, I just want to be clear that it's not, and of course you know this, it sounds easy to say like you just have to reconnect with your body. That's super fucking hard,
Yep.
right? For
Yep.
so many reasons, it's so
Yeah.
hard. And I
Yep.
get the resistance, and I've had the resistance. You
Yep.
probably have too.
Absolutely.
But this is the time, right? Like if this is now is the time to kind of just dip a toe in. I'm not even
Uh,
saying like reconnect fully. Just like dip a toe in.
just
See
a
what that's like. Just
just
yeah.
yeah, just a toe, right? Yeah, I love this. I love this so much. I love this conversation right now, this time of year. And, when I think about the workbook that you created, one of the things that I loved, and actually one of the questions I had for you is that after each like micro practice, you give a description of how to do it, and then you actually have like a body figure for us to like, okay, now, and it's so like just it's written with such love, and I can hear the love in the writing and in the language, and so it feels almost like I want to say a kindergarten teacher just because I have such warm feelings from my kindergarten teacher, and the way that I think our when you're a kid, that your teachers like teach you with such ease and kindness. That's how I felt like going through this. And you give us the figure of the body, and it's like, okay, now, like, where did you feel like the sensation? And
Mm-hmm.
so I love that you built that in, that you didn't just offer like, okay, here's a micro practice, do it. But you like invite us to really slow down. Like, where did you feel that in your body? And notice what changed. And so I think that is so important because all of the other things that keep our attention, our laptops, our cell phones, our Apple Watches, all of the dings that we have all day, it's literally like we are like in a system of things that keep us like not connecting with our body,
Yes.
right? And so this workbook, and for me, I really love folding in practices like this, like in between meetings, in between Zooms,
Yes.
when I have a little break, like that's how I re-energize and like go through a day, like if I have meetings all day.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think like we're in a system that keeps us disconnected from our bodies and feeling the feels, which are really the compass that we need to, I think, make the best decisions.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's the compass. We
Yeah,
need to be able to tap into that all the time.
yeah,
And there are so many reasons that that is hard. And I think part of like just encouraging folks to think about what was this experience like for me? Like how did this practice land for me? Where did I feel it? What did it feel like? What did I notice? That in and of itself is that's a step for so
yep,
many of us.
yeah,
The other thing is, when I was first kind of like sharing what I was thinking about with folks, and sharing drafts of the card deck or drafts of the card deck with folks. There were questions around like, okay, so are these because the cards are different colors? Are certain colors ones that are more energizing and others are more calming? It's like that is not for me to say,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
So the idea of the workbook is figure out how your body responds, figure out how you feel before and after, so that as a routine, and I use them in between meetings too, and we can come back to that in a second because there was just this amazing study that essentially said like you have to do this
Yeah,
in between meetings,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so that when you find yourself in a particular state or you come to realize like, ooh, I really constrict like in my sides and in my belly when I'm nervous, right? Okay, so what are the practices where I notice like just a little bit more space or more ease in my torso? Like how can you come to a place where you have a sense of here's how I'm feeling, here's what I need,
yep,
here's the type of movement or whatever that
yep,
can kind of nudge me in that direction. And I would guess like the practices that work for you would be different than the ones that work for me.
yeah,
Right? So you'll notice there are very few breath practices there. There are no exclusively breath practices where there's not something else happening, some
mm-hmm,
type of movement, some type of something else incorporated,
mm-hmm,
because that is often like the first thing we're taught in order to calm ourselves down. Is like take a deep breath,
yes,
slow your breathing,
yeah,
lengthen your exhale, all of those things. And while for a lot of people, I'm sure that's really, really helpful, for other people, that's really, really activating,
mm,
right? That can lead to over breathing or like taking in more air than you need, which is the same thing that happens in the body during the start of a panic attack,
mm,
right?
mm,
So what might
yep,
work to kind of get you back to center
yep,
might be something that feels terrible in my body.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the idea of the workbook is make your way through, figure out what feels good to you. I remember doing a yoga training where the teacher said like, what feels delicious in your
yeah,
body today?
yeah,
Right? So what are the practices that feel yummy?
yep,
What are the ones that are like, oh, never again?
yes,
Because
yeah,
those are in there too,
yep.
It's
It's
just like, yeah, it's a guide to kind of help folks figure it out. Hopefully, that's the idea.
absolutely, and it's so funny because one of the practices that I'm like, ooh, nope, don't like that. Whenever we are invited to like tense up, right? There's different, right? And I think there was one in here too, where it's
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
okay,
there is.
like clench your fist. I was like, no,
Clench your fist.
I hate that
Yes.
feeling. I saw it in the workbook. I was like, skip.
Yeah, nope.
And you gave us
Yes.
permission to do that. So I was like, yup, that was
Right.
not for me. right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
absolutely the ones where we're doing some of that repetitive movement, whether it's like tapping or I mean, and I'm a big visualization, so I think there was like a jellyfish visualization,
Yes,
right?
the
So I love
jellyfish.
when I can
That's
just
one of the
close my
only
eyes and
breath
kind of
practices that work for
daydream.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's got to be another piece to it. And there have to be options. You have to be able to say like, "Oh, no, thank you." You know?
Ass.
Like, no, that's not,
Yes.
no. That's why there's not 4-7-8 breathing, for example, which is like people that's supposed to help really with insomnia or falling to sleep, which
Hmm.
is like you breathe in, you hold your breath for a while, and then you breathe out really slowly.
Hmm.
There are very few ways to put me into a panic attack faster than making me
Mm.
hold my
Mm.
breath and breathe out slowly. But for somebody else, like that may be the one. That may
Yeah.
be the one that's gives
Yep.
them what they need.
Yeah.
So there's so much power in
Yep.
coming to understand like, no, I'm not going to tense something and that feels terrible to me.
Yeah.
Like good. You should know that about yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So good. I love it. So in the workbook, you give us, is it 20 or 23? I'm
28.
28. Okay. You give us
28.
28 micro practices. I would love for you maybe just to choose one and tell
Mhm.
us about it and or even like take us through it.
Yeah, for sure. So there's actually I'll share one and then I'll share one that's not in there,
Okay.
but will be when there's an expanded version. But I think it's
Ooh.
really helpful with screens because we're talking so much about Zoom and screens, right?
Hmm.
So the first one does involve tapping. There's a lot in there you'll read over and over again about pattern repetitive rhythmic
Yep.
activity or movement, which is this type of stimulation that creates neural level change. So that's the type of stimulation that builds our brains in the first place. If you think about the experience of a baby in the womb,
Yes.
what that sounds like, what that feels
Yeah.
like, what the movement's like, right? It's all that
Yep.
rhythmic, repetitive stimulation. And so that's the exact type of stimulation that can create kind of new neural connections for us throughout our lives, which is like incredible, right?
Amazing. Amazing.
And so in line with all of your work and your practices too. This one, which is called the butterfly tap, also shares some characteristics with EMDR, which is a modality that's really useful in treating post-traumatic stress disorder. What I like about it is the rhythm, the tapping, the movement, kind
Yeah.
of the not changing your breath, which that's in most of the micro practices too. Your
Hmm.
breath is not my business, right? Your breath is beautiful and perfect
I
because
love
it's
it.
keeping you alive.
Yeah.
I don't need you to do anything different. So the idea is that you cross your hands and your middle finger should point to like just below where the collarbone is, pointing up like this. I actually have a hard time. I've tried to do this in person before, and it's hard for me because it does start to relax me very quickly and it's hard to talk. So if I stop talking, just follow along. But the whole idea is breathe your beautiful, perfect breath. And as you're doing that, you're just going to tap on your collarbone, right underneath your collarbone, like butterfly wings, right? So that vision too of a butterfly flapping its wings, flying so freely and so powerfully. I told you.
Listen, listen. As soon as you said this, I was like, yeah, this is my jam
This is
because
it.
it's like a lullaby.
It is like a lullaby. And I think there's something about like this is another place where we hold a lot of tension and
Hmm.
constriction. And so rather than doing like, heart opening kind of stuff, it's just
Yep.
another way,
Yep.
yeah, to like
Yep.
offer yourself a little bit of love.
Yeah.
The other one I will share with you because I've been using this a lot when there's like a lot of Zoom time, which I just came across this article I posted at Microsoft did this study about they like put the little caps on people's heads and measured brain waves
I think I
for
saw
folks who
this on your
sat.
Instagram. I'm so glad
Yes.
you're, yes, I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah, they sat through 4 back-to-back Zoom meetings. So like 4 hours of Zoom, which many of us are like, that's what my days are like, right?
Yep.
they measured kind of the type of brain pattern that indicates stress over that period of time. And then another group of people had that same schedule but took like 10-minute breaks in between those four meetings. And they used, I think, Headspace or one of those like meditation apps during those 10-minute meetings. The group who had no breaks, the stress, as you know, we all know, just kind
Yep.
of accumulated throughout the day
Yes.
and spiked as you moved from meeting to meeting, which we
Yep.
also know
Yep.
because transitions are really hard and
Yep.
people had a lot of difficulty focusing because their energy is spent, right? That's when you're kind of in like survival mode,
Yep.
where the folks who took breaks didn't have that happen. They were able to kind of come back down to baseline each time and head into their next meeting with like a little bit of a more fresh or energized kind of perspective, which is duh again for people like us, but that's important. It's important that people see
Yeah.
that from sort of like a scientific
Yes.
perspective, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
So this one, and I will also say that some people, this movement is trickier, feels yucky, sensory wise. It doesn't for me. I'm going to do it anyway. If it does, you can also kind of just do this to build a little bit of heat.
Mm-hmm.
But if you rub your hands together to start to feel a little bit of warmth between your palms, right? And this is better done with glasses off,
Ooh.
but you are welcome to leave yours on if you want to. So once you feel some nice warmth between your hands, you're going to just kind of like create two cups and then just place them over your eyeballs
Mm. Oh my God, that feels so good.
and just breathe, right?
Because I've been at my laptop for a couple of hours, and this
Yeah.
is actually what I need right now. And I just,
See?
like, I put my hands over my eyes and I automatically closed my eyes, which also just created like a, oh, let's just,
Yeah. Even like my like face muscles respond to that, which is
yeah.
interesting in my neck and stuff. So yeah, those are two that I'm using a lot these days.
Oh my God.
Honestly, yeah, I use a lot of them regularly. And so do my kids and so do my
Yeah.
colleagues and
Yeah.
yeah, we're hopefully bringing some kind of balance and tools to folks like at the time where we all need all of the tools that we can
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That right there, both of those, because that was one of the ones that I really like. I know that um I like that rhythmic. I like the whenever
Yes.
I like that. I like very much my body's like yummy. Like when you talk about
Yes.
yummy, yes, like those are like yummy to me. The self touch is also very yummy to me. So anytime I'm putting my hands on my body, that feels like good and healing to me. Breath is a good one for me. But what I love about this book is like, again, you gave us 28, you just gave a 29th one, and it's like weaving them when they're needed and reaching for them when they're needed, and or like what feels good when. And so like, oh, okay, this is one that I can do when I need to put some breaks in between meetings. And thank you for
Yes.
sharing that study. It's so funny because when the pandemic got going and we were on Zooms like back to back to back, that is literally one of the things that I was telling people. Like, set some boundaries. Do
Yes.
not
Yes.
schedule meetings back to back. Don't take them. If you have to have one or two, give yourself a break. Don't eat your lunch in front of your screen. Stop eating lunch
Ah,
at your Zoom meetings. Stop it. And it was one of the first things that I told folks. And I think this goes back to so much of what we were saying before, right? Like, we actually have these tools, so many of them, and this knowledge, this wisdom, it's in our bodies.
yep.
And we know it and we have it. And it's just, can we practice it? Or can we find communities and spaces to practice it in and with other folks who get it? Because again, being a part of a culture that's capitalistic and the expectation is to produce, 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 which,
Yes.
thank you for the book references that you put at the back. And one of them I know is Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hurst
Yes.
that I'm working through right now. And it's like, it's a freaking masterclass on rest And this,
Yes.
like, why we are so programmed to not choose tools like this, but why it's so important.
Yes, yes. And that was totally an well, I was going to say unintended consequence, but maybe it was intended by the powers that be of these like sort of back to back to back to back to back, like there's no commute anymore, right? And so rather than where initially it was like, oh, I can take better care of myself when I'm working from home because I can make a lunch, for example,
Mhm.
or I can take a walk or take a dog out or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Very quickly though, it turned into like 9:30 to 10:30 to 11:30 to 12:30 because nobody's leaving their houses anymore. Like we
Yep.
weren't even allowed those few minutes in between.
Yep.
And I was joking with a friend the other day that we need to talk about like virtual commute time, but the commute is just like back to ourselves,
Ooh,
right? Right?
come
five
on.
minutes,
Come
5 minutes
on.
to virtually commute. It's so cheesy, but to commute back to yourself.
Listen, I need you to trademark that, copyright that. That is a whole paper, something, because
We got to do it.
absolutely. It's crazy. As I knew would happen, like we're already at time. We're already like at
Oh
an
my
hour.
gosh, don't
I
even
know
remind.
this conversation has been so good. And thank you for sharing again the practices with
Oh, of
us in
course.
real time, because that's the other thing I always like to do is not just talk about stuff, but like, okay, let's practice it together right now. So
Yes.
thank you for offering that to us. But I would love for you to tell folks where they can find you and where they can pick up their cards or their workbook.
Yes. So probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is through social media. So my handle on Twitter and Instagram is at Dr. Jenny King. I also have a shop as part of my website that's at drjennyking.com/shop. If you're in the Cleveland area, the card decks are sold at Lion and Blue in Lakewood, which is also just a really cool store if you're in the Cleveland area for gifts and stuff like that. But yeah, please reach out if you have questions about any of this stuff. I'm always happy to answer and provide whatever I can to help folks feel a little bit better.
Amazing. Guys, if you're joining, this is Ignite at Night. My name is Nike Olabisi-Green, and we have just spent the past hour talking about boundaries, finding peace, really setting boundaries through the holidays. We've chatted with Dr. Jenny King. She offered some micro practices for us to really just take that virtual commute back to ourselves, which that to me is, as a person that loves words, like that is so yummy to me. I love that because that is so good and it's so clear what it is. Before we go, is there any like last thing that you want to offer folks or leave folks with um, before we jump off? I just want to make sure I ask one last time.
Yeah, I just, I always like to remind myself and other people that there's a lot of celebrating that happens in the next few weeks, but this is also like a high time for grief for a lot of people. And so just to remember, whether that's you, that you can have both grief and gratitude at the same time, right? You can be happy and sad at the same time.
Yeah.
But also just to be like extra gentle with yourselves and with each other because you never know what this kind of season feels like for people.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. That's so powerful and so true. Holding grief and gratitude at the same time. Absolutely. Um, Dr. Jenny King, thank you so much for your time and energy tonight. I'm so grateful to have you in my community and in my network of folks that I can reach out to and that I can see on my social feed, like, yes, double tap every time, because you serve up such, just like that study that you shared, you serve up such meaningful content. And I think, especially with this workbook and the cards, like practices that we can meaningfully, easily unfold into our lives right now. So thank you so much for your time and energy.
Thank you for having me. I love talking to you. I'll talk to you about anything, anywhere.
Deal, deal. All right, ma'am. I'm going to close us out. If this was your first Ignite at Night, thank you so much for joining. This is a double week. So I'm actually going to be back here tomorrow night talking about Believing, the 30-year journey to end gender violence. This book is by Anita Hill, and this is a special Cleveland edition. I want us to talk about Deshaun Watson. So get this, I'm going to be on by myself. I need you to join me live or drop your questions so that we can have a real time conversation. Join me in the chat. And by the way, if you want to get on camera with me, it's going to be open. It's like open office hours, right? So I want to chat about this book. I want to chat about the impact to Cleveland of having an NFL player like Deshaun Watson with all of the accusations and allegations against him in the city of Cleveland. I think that book was so timely when we read it as a community this summer, and it continues to be timely. So join me tomorrow night. We'll have that conversation. Again, my name is Nike Olabisi-Green. I'm the creator and chief movement leader at NOLA Movement, and I deeply believe that when women are well from the inside out, we can change the world, and I'm on a mission to do just that. Make sure you stay in touch, like, share, subscribe, all the things, and I will see you at the next Ignite at Night. Peace, guys.